Welcome to Mecum Presents On the Move, brought to you by State Farm. It's the show geared toward keeping you up to speed with the latest auto news, event coverage, and expert industry insight. Now, here are your hosts, Matt Avery and John Kraman.
Hey, and welcome to another On the Move, and a Happy New Year to those tuning in. My name is Matt Avery. I'm executive producer of The Transmission, and joining me, as always, is my co-host, John Kraman, lead TV commentator for Mecum Auctions on NBCSN. John, I can't think of a better spot to be to kick off this new year than right here on site at Mecum's Kissimmee auction. It's the world's largest collector car auction, and there is so much to see and do here, and that's why we're spending this entire show talking about Mecum Kissimmee. Starting with in segment 2, we've been able to get Frank Mecum, Director of Consignments. We've been able to grab him off the block for a couple minutes to talk about what's in store for Mecum in 2021. And then in segment 3, we have a highly anticipated conversation with Harold Gerdes, VP of Operations for Mecum Auctions. This has been a conversation long in the works. We've gotten so much feedback from listeners who have asked us to kind of pull back the curtain about what it takes for Mecum Auctions to put on these events, and Harold is the behind-the-scenes guy that can answer all of those questions and a whole lot more.
Matt, I cannot think of a better way to kick this auction off with an entire podcast dedicated to all things Kissimmee. That is really great. You know, one thing that we like to do from time to time is look at the inventory and make a little wish list. Pick a car that, if we had an unlimited budget and unlimited room in our garages, we could start adding to our modest fleets. And I'll tell you, there's one car that has just jumped out at me as being just, number one, unusual, but just having the look as defined by something very special. I just invite everybody to check out lot number F111. It's a 1970 Ford Torino Twister Special, one of 90 built, but only one of 30 built, Matt, with a 4-speed manual transmission powered by a 370 horsepower, 429 cubic inch Ford Cobra Jet engine. It's restored. It's in that really cool vermilion color. I'm going to say the potential here is for a world record price. I'm not kidding, on a Ford Torino. It's selling at no reserve. It's a main attraction. I would not be surprised, Matt, to see this car hammer at $200,000 for a Ford Torino. Now that I've said all that, you're being a little bit greedy in your choice. You've actually picked not one, not two, but a trio of cars. What did you find?
I did, John. Well, technically, I found one car. It's just we happen to have 3 examples, and that is the Chevrolet El Morocco, lot number S153, 154, and 155. Really special cars. I know at first glance, people might be quick to be like, well, I've seen that before. What's so special? Because it does appear to look like your run-of-the-mill Tri-5 Chevy, but there's a story behind it there. It's so cool. A businessman back in the day had purchased a 1955 Cadillac Eldorado, liked it so much, had this idea to take Tri-5 Chevys from the day and upfit them to look like Cadillacs, giving them even more chrome and big fins, but still have them be a little bit more affordable than a Cadillac. Unfortunately, he never could get that price down, so only about 32 were built. So it's very rare to see one, and it's even rare to see 3 of them like we have here.
That's a cool special interest car, Matt. And going all the way back, you know, they were, at the time, they were intended to be a poor man's Cadillac, but the reality is all these years later, they're so legendary and so sought after, they're worth more than a comparable Cadillac of the same year. I'm sure the gentleman that had that program put together did not expect that to happen. And you're right, man, those El Moroccos, we've had a few of them in the past. They always bring really big money, and they get strong attention as well.
Mecum Auctions is proud to bring you On the Move with Matt Avery and John Kraman. For more on the world of collector cars, head over to Mecum.com. Now let's get back to the show.
Well, Matt, we've got the perfect guest for our launch podcast for calendar year 2021. Frank Mecum, the man himself, consignment director, the guy that works the auction block at the auctions, a member of the Mecum executive team that has guided this company, assisted getting obviously 2020 to huge success. We recapped that, but let me just give you the details. 13 auctions in calendar year 2020 and almost $340 million of sales generated. 10 of those 13 auctions, by the way, during the pandemic era from June all the way into December. Frank, thanks for coming on. First of all, what are your initial thoughts on, now that 2020 is over with, on how well it went for Mecum?
It's been a crazy year. We have had to learn new ways to do everything. We had to learn to adapt on the fly, and it is a credit to everybody that works for us, from the lowest levels to upper management, everybody being all in and doing what they had to do to make sure that we were successful getting through this. When a lot of people said we couldn't do it, we were able to work through the problems and work through the issues that we had to make sure we could have safe, competitive auctions that were successful for buyers and sellers.
So here we are, Frank. We're kicking off a brand new year. I know it's still early, but even at this point, do you see any trends developing that we should be aware of?
Some of the new things that we've seen this year is definitely the amount of absentee buying. And that was expected with the current pandemic. But the numbers that we were able to achieve with our live online auctions and then also our phone biddings really helped keep the auctions going and keeping our sales percentage through the roof. A normal year we're running 70 to 75%, which is great for industry standards. And the last 3 auctions have been over 80%. And for the year, I think we're going to finish somewhere in the high 70s, which is unheard of for a consignment auction.
Well, a lot of credit for that given to the Mecum IT team putting together what was referred to internally as Operation High Rise. That actually went into effect with an all-new hardware and software to really help, and in particular, the internet bidding, the computer bidding in place for Kissimmee 2020, which was pre-virus era. Man, was that like the perfect storm or what, to be able to have everything in place and to switch so seamlessly and have that be such a big part to the success? How did that happen?
Just knowing where the world's going and technology-wise, putting a big investment into technology is something we've always believed in, keeping us at the front edge of everything that's going on. So being able to have that in place when we came into late March, early April, when going into quarantine and the shutdown, we were able to stop on the dime and move everybody to their home offices and not miss a beat.
Well, and I think that's, part of the success of the year was attributed to the Mecum team all the way, as you mentioned, from the top all the way to the bottom, not only want to continue along with their jobs and with holding successful auctions, but to do it as safely as possible. Who do you give the most credit to for developing that plan of safety to be able to get approval in particular at so many of these venues that we were at this year?
The credit goes to everyone. Everyone stayed positive, never got down. It's just a credit to the whole team to be able to get us through that when everybody says you can't do this, and just to be able to keep the mentality is that this is doable and it's doable safe, and this is how we're going to do it, and just push forward.
As being responsible for the consignments, which is the heart and soul of what Mecum Auction's all about, how did you find the consigners' attitudes, not only an individual consigner, but collections continue to be a huge part of 2020 and going into 2021. I'm expecting to see the same thing. How did you combat those issues about making these people feel good about consigning?
Early on, it was definitely tough. People had a lot of questions about not as much is it going to be safe, is it going to be successful?
Right.
They're worried about their investment. And once we started proving that we can have successful, safe sales, it really started to ramp up again.
We are seeing so many collections cross the block, Frank. As we move further into the year, do you expect that trend to continue?
Definitely. The collections we have at Kissimmee are some of the best cars we've ever had. The Larry Carroll collection is one that I'm super excited for. And we have so many other collections that are really going to highlight the sale. And going forward into 2021, we expect to see a lot of the same. And we also expect to announce 2 major main attraction collections at Kissimmee that will be going to our Glendale auction. So everybody needs to tune in for that.
So if you were to give any advice to anybody listening that is kind of on the sidelines from a consignment standpoint, what would you tell them if they're thinking about consigning in 2021?
If they're thinking about consigning in 2021, the best thing that they have going for them right now is a white hot market. Right. Cars are doing better than they ever have before. We're 10 years into this market that just keeps growing. So it's a great time to sell a car. Still a great time to buy a car. There's a lot of cars out there that are going to be for sale this year. So it's time to sell the old and get into something new.
Did it surprise you that during the pandemic era, as we've been calling it, that the demand for cars, collector cars, has continued to be as strong as it is?
That was very surprising. You didn't know how people were going to react to the pandemic, if they were going to lock themselves down. But as Americans, everybody came, and it was time to do something. If this is something they always wanted to do, they've decided to do it now. And we've seen that over and over again. People saying, I've been wanting to do this, and I've been putting it off and putting it off. I'm not putting it off anymore. I want to do it.
Yeah, we've heard the exact same thing. What a great way to get through this pandemic, owning and operating a cool collector car, whether you're restoring it, working on it in your garage, buying it, cruising in it. That's just a really safe, enjoyable way to get through this time. And we're not the only ones that feel that way. Big part of the success. Let's move into 2021. I'm counting 11 collector car consignment auctions on the schedule, not including motorcycles and tractors, and some other auctions that would pop up. You're a big part of putting together this 2021 schedule. What do you think, looking down the road at all the different locations, how do you think 2021 is going to go?
Very excited for 2021. We're going to be able to get back to a couple markets that we ended up missing out because of the pandemic. Going to be getting back to Harrisburg, which is one of our top auctions of the year, and one of everybody's favorite to go to. Just right. The atmosphere is great. Getting back to Car Week in Monterey, getting back to Denver.
Yes.
So we'll be getting back to some of these places that we missed out on last year, and that's what we're really looking forward to.
A lot of businesses have gone digital or all virtual. Frank, talk a little bit about how Mecum is planning on balancing that as well as continuing to hold safe live events.
Well, we've shown that we can definitely stay safe during the live event, and it's one of those things that it goes to say with just about everything going on right now is everybody wants to be either one thing or the other, and there's no middle. And that's what we've shown, is that the best collector car auction is putting both together, and having a live auction with a online platform to go on top of it makes for the best experience for sellers and buyers.
Well, I think it's safe to say, Frank, bottom line, you and your entire team has just done an extraordinary job. No reason at all to think why that's not going to continue into 2021. Plenty of information out there at mecum.com for those folks that want to look at each individual past auction that was held in 2020. There's a press release with all of the data available. We're totally transparent when we're talking about the market and the success. Once again, thanks for taking some time away from the auction block. You guys are busy out there, and got our fingers crossed for another great 2021. Thanks, man.
Thank you.
Don't adjust that dial. On the Move, we'll be right back. Our program is proudly presented by Mecum Auctions, the world's largest collector car auctions. Now back to Matt and John.
You know, John, since we launched On the Move, we've got a lot of feedback from listeners that have asked all kinds of questions about Mecum operations. And over the last couple of months, we've been able to bring on a lot of the top executive staff to answer those. And we haven't addressed one until today. And it's probably one of the most common questions we get, which is, how does Mecum do what it does? You know, people come to our events and there's so much to take in, and they always wonder, how does it happen? Well, we're so excited. We have the wizard behind the curtain, as you refer to him, Harold Gertis. He is the VP of Operations. He's been with the company for 19 years. Harold, we know you're so busy running around the fairgrounds, but we appreciate you taking some time to sit down with us today. Let's start with, how far in advance have you been working on this event?
Tell you what, Matt, this is a year-long event planning process. And the thing is, it changes each year. There's the similarities in all our auctions that you see when you watch a television show, for instance, but there's so many unique little quirks to each location you go to that you do actually have to plan it all year and keep doing changes all year. So it's a long process to get here. It's great to be here. This is, in my mind, is our most fun auction of the year. And John, I think you probably feel the same. It's just such a challenge to pull off a 10 or an 11-day sale with all of the pieces, the cars, the road art, the staff, the audience, the bidders, and to get this all come together, that there's such satisfaction after it's done that we pulled it off again. It's just a lot of fun.
From an operations standpoint for this conversation, we're going to be focusing in on this auction, Kissimmee, and there's some pretty good reasons for that. Mecum Kissimmee is, in fact, the world's largest collector car auction, bar none. It is immense. So, Harold, we're really going to be curious to hear exactly when do you start getting on site? When does your staff and crew start to get on site? And how long after the close of the auction will the last person finally be able to head out?
Good question. The tenting is amazing at this sale. We have over 11 acres of tent. And we have some of the largest tents in the world. We have one tent that's almost 600 feet long that is just an enormous tent. And then we've got the big glass house tents. Anyway, you put all this together. It takes a long time to put all of this up, as you might expect. So we start as early as December 14th this year.
Wow.
Putting these tents up and give the crew a little break at Christmas. They go home for a couple days, come right back. And then by the 3rd of January, which was our first check-in day this year, we had all of it up and ready to go and ready to put cars in and display and bring the public in.
So starting in mid-December, a pretty serious effort begins for the setup. It sounds like a lot of people have to be in place by early January to accommodate check-in. So we're getting a timeline put together here. How far down the road will this auction run when the last person finally leaves the facility?
It'll take about 3 weeks to get it all done and wrapped up and cleaned out. And actually, we move out and the fair moves in. So we cooperate with the next group that's coming in and make it all work.
Now, you mentioned, Harold, several times the crew that's on site. Give us an idea of the boots on the ground. How many people total are we talking about?
We start out relatively small, Matt, with 15, 20 people, and then it grows daily. As we bring in, we start out with a rigging crew that puts up the lighting in the arena, and then we bring in a setup crew that starts the stage, and then we bring in the setup crew that sets everything else up, and then we bring in the office, and then we bring in the bidder crew, and the check-in crew. That all happens before the cars start coming in. So at that point, you're at about 100 people or so, or maybe 125. By the time the show is up and running, we've got 250 employees, plus the television staff, which is another 50 people that come in for that, plus the drivers and the pushers. So it gets to be a pretty big group. And of course, the other sales aren't quite as big as this as far as staff, but this is our big one, and this is where we have to pull everybody together.
Now, in addition to the people, the cars, and the venue, Harold, to make these events so successful, you need one more piece, and that's the equipment. When you come to a Mecum auction, there's so much set decorating and design and all the elements of the block and sound and AV. Give us an idea of how much is there and how does it get there?
Well, in a normal auction, we have about 10 to 11 semis. In this case, we have 16, I believe it is, this year, semis of equipment here to make this all happen. So it's even the logistics of that gets to be a bit of a challenge, but we always seem to pull it off.
One of the high-profile and rarely talked about elements of a Mecum auction, whether folks are there in person at the auction buying, selling, or spectating, or watching on television, are the people that drive the cars across the auction block. How is that managed?
I tell you, they're an amazing group of people. We have, first of all, we look for people who enjoy cars and that respect cars and know how to drive cars and know how to drive a stick, for instance. It's getting tougher all the time to find people that know how to drive a stick. But in this case, we have a professional group that actually works with us because the auction is so large. They manage the group. They help find the drivers and manage it, and take some of that responsibility off of what we would normally do at other auctions. So we're very fortunate to have this group. I mean, the first thing we think about is safety. When you think about having the number of people we have here as you look around, and making sure everyone is safe and that the people are driving these cars properly, no one gets tapped or hit, it's a pretty big deal. But we are very fortunate that we have drivers that come back year after year after year and help us, and really look forward to it. A lot of people come in from other parts of the country just to do this because they like driving so well.
Folks listening probably have a idea that this is a pretty complicated event, but in reality, your background of event planning, event management, going all the way back, did you ever envision, back from your early days of you and Dana basically running these auctions yourself together, going back almost 20 years since you started, did you ever think that it would grow to this type of a scope? And how have you adapted to the immense size of an event like this?
Well, that's interesting because Dana, I'm sure, had this planned in his mind when I met him 20 years ago. I certainly didn't, because when I came on, Bob King was our operations person at that point, and everything traveled around in one little small trailer behind a van. And
Wow.
you put up a curtain and a podium, and you'd do the auction, you'd go home, and it's just evolved over the years, where we went to a real stage set, and of course television coming on, and the lighting and the television set and all that went with it just increased all of that, and each year we try to make it bigger and better, as you know, and every time you make it a little bigger and better, you need more trucks and more people and more things to make it happen. But I didn't envision this. I did not have that future vision that Dana had, but I'm sure he did know that.
Now, Harold, while you are running point on overseeing a lot of these operations, you also work with the team. Can you give us an idea of who those additional staff members are?
Well, if you step back to the office, Matt, it's a very small group in operations. There are 4 of us that do all of the basic pieces and put it together. But then when you get on the road, there are so many people, it'd be impossible to come up with all of the lists of people, because we have so many great department heads. Each area that you see out here has somebody managing that. And all I do, and my job is very simple. I coordinate with those folks, and they have total rule to get things done. And the culture of Mecum is one of a family. These folks, there have been so many of these great people that have been with Mecum for so many years, and they feel empowered to do the right thing, to treat customers right, and that's always the top priority, treat customers so well, whether you're a bidder, a seller, or a spectator. And that's just ingrained in our culture. And I think that's why it's such a pleasure to work with Mecum, with the Mecum family, and the people we have, because there's just such a great dedication that everybody wants to do it right. They do the best job they can, and they do.
Well said. Break down those categories for us, the different areas, everything from the check-in folks all the way to the folks in the office. How many different sort of groups or categories of people does it take to put this event on?
John, I'm sure I'm going to forget some people in doing this, just sitting here off the top of our head, but we've got the check-in group, as you say.
Yep.
We've got the setup guys that are so good. They come in and work so hard at putting all this together. We've got the office people that take such good care of everyone. We've got the bidder department that also just work very hard to make sure everybody is happy and everybody's signed up and in place. We've got a TV crew. We've got the auction block crew. We've got the auctioneers. We've got the drivers and the pushers, and who am I missing? I mean, there's just so many people. And then you expand that into whatever facility you're in. For instance, the Osceola Heritage Park, we've been here well over 10 years, and we've had the same staff every year for all that time. That's very unusual. But they become part of our staff too. I mean, we work so well together. That's one reason we really enjoy coming here each year, is this staff at Osceola Heritage Park is almost like our family. So you put all those people together, and it's just an amazing thing that we get to pull off, and it's such an honor to be able to do it.
The reason that I asked, I just wanted our listeners to truly understand just how many moving parts there are at this auction. And if there is one person directly responsible for the operation, the smooth operation of auction after auction, Harold, it is you. Now, the vision starts with Dana Mecum and other members of the Mecum family. Dave Majors, our CEO, and everybody from A to Z rely on you to be able to successfully execute these auctions. And probably like a lot of us, we all have a tendency to take everybody for granted, like turning the light switch on. You expect it to come on. Do you feel much pressure in these roles?
I feel a very big honor and responsibility of doing it, but the pressure, no. I mean, we've been doing it so many years, and we have such a good group of people doing it. It's almost like second nature. And if you do enough planning before going into an event, as you both know, you take care of all the big problems, and then when you get on site, that's when you deal with the things that change and deal with the little problems. But it's been such a great run. I'm so honored to be with the Mecum Group.
Now, Harold, I know your days are probably never the same, but can you give us a rundown of what your typical day looks like when you're on site?
Well, we usually start kind of early, as you could expect. 6:30 or so, we'll get to the venue. Make sure everything is ready, so when the gates open at 7:30 or 8, everything is in place, and ticket takers and ticket sellers and security and all those pieces are in place. All the lot managers and building managers and office and everything's ready to go. So that's kind of the beginning of the day. Make sure it's going, and then it kind of falls into a flow as the auction is going. We make sure everything keeps moving. The cars are moving and they're on the block on time, and we don't run short of cars. And some of the things we do here at Kissimmee, the car parades and the other little entertainment things that go on, the road art that happens, just watch over that all day long. My deal is I like to be on the move. And I very rarely use a golf cart. Everybody wants a golf cart. We'll have 80 or 100 golf carts here. I'd rather walk around, because if I walk around, I can hear what customers are saying and what our spectators are saying, and hear what is going on in their minds. So then you can make those little adjustments as you need. And so I'm pretty much on the move all day. And then at the end of the auction, of course, you're waiting for everything to wrap up. The office has to wrap up, and all of the departments have to wrap up, and usually the last one out the door to make sure security has locked the gates and we're ready for the next day.
Wow. Long days.
Now, Harold, you've been with the company for a long time. My guess is that you're a passionate car enthusiast. What types of vehicles are you into?
My dad was a car dealer. He owned a Packard dealership in Dixon, Illinois, back in the 50s. And by the time I was born, he had already sold that, but he kept his favorite car, which was a 51 Packard convertible. And he kept that car, and that was kind of our, let's go ride in the Packard. It was no big thing. It wasn't a collector car in those days. But he kept it, and when he passed away, I kept the car, and we've restored it to some extent. It's still pretty much original, but that's my love. I love Packards, and I always have, and everything related to Packard. I love all cars and just enjoy seeing the art of a car. I mean, it's beautiful, but I really am a Packard lover.
I got just a little final note as a little personal story. I first met Harold Gerdes back in 2006. I sold airplanes for 20 years, and Dana Mecum had found me, heard I was this car guy, and met with Dana for about 15, 20 minutes, said, I want you to meet my operations guy, Harold Gerdes. So back in 2006, Harold and I met for the very first time, and my initial impression of his demeanor and his enthusiasm, his sincerity for his work and for the Mecum family was infectious. It rubbed off on me immediately, and of course I was hired, and here we are now, Harold, all these years later, working together. My respect and my admiration for you has only grown in that time period, and I'm speaking for everybody that you are a beloved part of this organization, and all of us are so grateful for your efforts to keep this thing going, and I just want to say, man, really glad to be working with you, and have a good Kissimmee.
Hey, thank you, John. Thank you, Matt.
You've been listening to Mecum Presents On the Move, brought to you by State Farm. For more information, visit mecum.com. And join us again next time as we take you inside the world of muscle and collector cars and more.